that's not something that you're taught at university. It's not a theoretical thing. It's an experience thing. And I guess to your point with not rushing, my first full-time role in elite sport was when I was 30 years old.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. My name is James Grigson, and today I'm joined by the new head of high performance for the Fremantle Dockers AFL club, a former member of the Melbourne Football Club, a long-time physical performance coach for the Hawthorn Football Club, Phil Merriman. Phil, thank you for coming on, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, James. Good to be here.
You're only 2 weeks into the new role at Freo. We were just chatting off air about the big move that you've undertook over to Perth, but what was the process like coming into the Freo Footy Club, and how's it been for your first few weeks?
The process is as in once I got here, or the process is in how I got here?
Well, yeah, sort of how you got there, mate. So, for those that don't know, you've been a Vic boy for a long time. Sort of studied over there and spent a lot of your time professional career over there, and it's a big move. So, and these processes either can be in pro sport. It's either really quick, hey, you've got the job, let's relocate, or it sort of seems like it's quite a long, drawn-out process. So I'm interested to hear your journey on actually getting to Freo and the journey you went through to obtain the role.
Yeah, so I guess the journey started when we were in the hub with Melbourne Footy Club up in Cairns. Melbourne Footy Club were staying in the same hotel as Fremantle and also Sydney, which is quite unique in itself, having playing against the two teams that you're basically bashing each other up, and then you get in the lift straight after the game with the same team. So it was quite unique. So we spent 5 days up there, and a former player at Hawthorn, who's now a coach here at Fremantle, David Hale, sat down with me, and we knew that there was a role available at Fremantle. So it was more about just discovering what that role was, and then that led to an introduction to the footy manager, Peter Bell, and then I went through the process that everybody else went through in regards to applying for the role, just through Seek. They advertised on Seek. They got a few applicants. I got down to interview stage, where I went through an hour long what you would call a behavioural type interview, where the football manager, the CEO, and the HR person was involved in, and then that got down to I believe it was around 3, and then that interview was more based around case study. So I had to present a 45-minute to an hour presentation on 3 case studies, and then it was left to the decision makers, and I got a call a few weeks later, actually, because they were dealing with a lot of list management issues. Obviously, COVID was still going on, so it was probably a drawn-out process of around 6 weeks, to the point where I was actually I thought I didn't get the role, and myself and my wife Sarah and kids had moved on, and basically thought we were going to be in Melbourne. And then I, out of the blue, got a call and got told I was successful in achieving the role. But then at that point, it was more about, oh God, now we've got to think about life decisions, and it wasn't a simple yes. It was a chat with family, and pretty emotional time with family and in-laws, and pulling the kids out of their lives, which my kids are only 4 and 2. But there's all those things that you got to take into consideration in regards to taking the role. But speaking to a lot of people around me, Darren Burgess, I remember having chats with Andrew Russell and the head physio at Hawthorn, Andrew Lambert, around when these opportunities don't come around too often. So you got to take them. And and yeah, so that's led me to here. I've left my family back in Melbourne. I've been here for the good part of 2 weeks. Head home on Friday for Christmas, and then I'm back just following the new year, and right into it. So that's basically the process that got me to Fremantle, and it's been a great 2 weeks that I've spent here so far. It's an incredible club, full of really good people. I've only been here 2 weeks, but I feel like it's my home already. So yeah, pretty exciting times.
Fantastic, mate, and a flash home they've got there at Coburn. So I'm glad it's suiting you well. Just quickly on the family, will they be able to come back at the beginning of the new year, or is sort of a bit of a transition period there?
Yeah, there's probably more of a transition period from a family standpoint. It's another, I guess, addition to the story. We built our forever home over a period of 18 months, and it's due to be finished in January. So as you could probably understand, Sarah was probably a little bit down that we were leaving our forever home not being lived in. But what the kids and Sarah are going to do is going to live in the house for 3 months. That's part of a defect clause without going into too much detail of the housing industry. That will be a 3-month defect clause. If the house is going to fall over, then we can report back and get it fixed, and then they'll come over around March, April.
It's certainly trying times, I assume, for you, but you'll be kept well busy with learning the culture and getting stuck in with Freo. I'm really curious, actually, from a case study perspective. I think those are the sort of moments where it's like a test you didn't know you had to study for. I've had to prepare some case studies for new people coming on board. I've also had to be a part of those sort of case studies, and it's almost a combination of the skills that you've learned over your career. And I had an interesting chat with Simon Harries a few weeks ago, the head of sort of rehabilitation services at GWS Giants, and he was saying that there's a lot of young coaches that try to rush their development. And to sort of put it a bit more poignantly, he put it really well, but he was saying that people are really quick to try and get onto the next thing and get onto the next thing, get onto the next thing. And his message was sort of like, well, wait, you can't rush the time. Like, you can read as many books, there's so many resources out there, so many webinars, etc. But the time that it takes to learn these skills is really what you need to put yourself through. And I imagine a lot of those experiences came back to you when it was time to report back on these tasks. Do you mind taking me through any sort of experiences that you were able to then parlay into some of the answers that you were able to produce for the tasks, without maybe going to the task for too much detail if you don't want to? But I'm sure that there was a lot of experience that you're able to then draw upon to answer these tasks for the Freo role. Yeah,
it's a good question. And one of the things that stood out in my mind when I was going through the process, I've been through 3 of these processes before. And to be frank, I missed the mark completely in one of the interviews, one of the processes. And the other one, my feedback was that my management skills weren't quite there. So obviously went out and did some courses in leadership and management. But one of the things that stood out in this process was the fact that when I look back at my progression, I started personal training when I was 19. I've coached senior level hockey for the best part of 10 years. And all of those experiences add up, and you don't think it at the time when you're personal training 65-year-old women or 12-year-old boys or vice versa. But all of those experiences add up, and what it shows is that you have what it showed is that I had pretty flexible communication skills, where I know how to deal with a lot of different people. And obviously in a footy club there is a lot of different people, from coaches, administration, especially in this role, you've got touch points all around the club. So I was able to draw upon all of those experiences in my field hockey coaching career, my personal training career, and then moving through into, my elite sporting career with Hawthorn Footy Club, a little bit of GWS Footy Club, Melbourne Football Club and some of the work that I've done in clinic just prior to that. So I guess that's not something that you're taught at university. It's not a theoretical thing. It's an experience thing. And I guess to your point with not rushing, my first full-time role in elite sport was when I was 30 years old, 29, and that was at Hawthorn Footy Club. I had a part-time role with GWS, but not much. So I couldn't agree more with that advice. Is that there's certainly no rush, and you need to gain a lot of experience in different areas to get to these roles.
And you mentioned your hockey experience. I'm interested, like I said, a lot of your experience was in Vic. Had you grown up hockey and footy? Was that sort of your two sports, or did you transition into footy just because there were roles available?
Yeah, I grew up playing hockey from the age of 5, and I retired from playing due to injury at the age of 26. My parents didn't like footy, so that's basically why I didn't play growing up. But I did sneak away in the odd under 12s and under 14s and get a quick game of footy under my belt. I was no good. I was played like a hockey player right on the outside. But
no hardball wins.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go near that. But the hockey side of things, I went straight from playing and into coaching and into a senior role at 26. And then throughout, I started my university as a mature age student at 21. I did a couple of fitness courses when I was 18, started when I was 21, finished my undergrad when I was 24, and then moved into my master's from about 25 to 30. I did it over a long period of time. So and then all the while coaching hockey, personal training, and doing and sort of keeping that working side going in the background.
And then the transition into footy, was that always something that you thought you were going to get into or aspired to get into, or was that just a matter of I'm in Melbourne and the paying roles in sports science are in footy? Or the majority of paying roles are in sports science are in footy. So was that sort of the reason why you got into AFL?
Yeah, the very first reason I decided to go into exercise science was when I did a level 1 ASCA course at the VIS, and the guy running it was a guy called Chris Hink, who's still going around, and I thought, geez, that's a good role. I couldn't think of anything better than to be working with. He was working with the hockey program at the time. How good would it be to make these hockey players or help these hockey players be better? And so that's when I set up on that course to be in elite sport. And then as my progression went through, I saw footy, and I knew a few people who were working in footy. So I sort of there was a guy who I was personal training with, Rob Jackson, who many people would know as an extremely good strength power coach, but also high performance coach as well. He moved into the Melbourne Storm, so then I got a bit of a taste seeing his career progression, and then it just sort of naturally came about that there was some money to be made in footy and some cool jobs that were around. So then that was sort of where that direction took me.
And talk me through sort of you mentioned and put a lot of value on the early coaching experience that you had in hockey and in PT. If I think I'm good at anything, it would be able to speak to people of all ages, and I credit that to about 4 or 5 years of personal training myself. So I really think that it's a skill that becomes translatable in a number of different areas of life and professional life, but particularly in coaching. Can I think a lot of young sports scientists or people studying at the moment, they might think NCPT just as a way to make ends meet, which ultimately it is, right? But there's a lot of experience to be had. And is there any words that you would have for those people that maybe see just PT as a clock in, clock out role? Is there something that you might be able to challenge them to do inside of their 9 to 5, or it's not necessarily 9 to 5, but their PT sessions that might help their development as a coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, looking back, and this is probably the key point, and I hate to sound like an old fart with experience or anything like that, but looking back on it, I can see so much value in, like I said before, dealing with an array of different people. So from the PT side of things, um, holding a conversation, just as simple as holding a conversation with a grandmother who has just donated her kidney, and this was one of my clients, just donated her kidney to her son, who was about to, who was in dire need of a kidney replacement. So dealing with someone like that, to someone who has a mother of three who's just divorced from her husband, who's got high anxiety around all sorts of things, dealing with simply walking into a gym, and helping them work through those anxious moments. There is so much to be learnt, not just reps and sets and getting someone fit and losing weight. From a professional development standpoint, there is so much to be gained to be working with all these different types of people. As far as advice I'd give, it is just purely that get into it. There is, I don't think I've ever seen a coach walk out of uni and walk straight into a role within an elite sporting organisation. Perhaps a sports scientist that's behind a computer, but a coach, it doesn't happen. And you need to go and find those soft skills out in the big wide world.
I want to talk about your time at Hawthorn. You had a few years there, a large majority of your professional career, and like you mentioned, it was your first full-time role. You were there for some really good years for Hawthorn, and you were under a really well-respected person in the industry for Andrew Russell, who you mentioned before. I'm interested whether it's a story about Andrew or whether it's a story about a particular moment in the season, any sort of stories that you might have around just the culture of, well, at least from my perspective, there's a perceived excellence, especially when a team and a club goes on a run. I'm not talking about, there are premierships, but they were deadly consistent prior to you joining, and then those years where you were there, and there's still remnants of that now. I'm keen to hear any sort of lessons or advice that you got from Andrew, or any elements of the Hawks culture where you went, wow, this has made me up my game, or I'm going to take this for the rest of my career as something that I do daily, or I do weekly, or I think about and reflect on. Anything that you can share?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the word consistency. The first thing is the performance and medical department remained consistent throughout my time. It was very rare that someone would leave the program because basically they felt valued, and that started from the top. From the footy manager all the way down with the coach, and massively through Andrew Russell. When you were in front of him, you felt like you were the only person in the world that mattered to him, and that is one of his huge strengths. But one of the things that our department and even the coaching department did so well was the collaborative nature of the department. And I don't mean having 3 meetings a day on what they did and what needs to be done. It was more around, I felt like I was getting professionally developed every conversation I had with Jack. That's his nickname, Andrew Russell. Every time I spoke to him, I drew something out of that conversation, just as much as I did with Luke Boyd, who was the strength and conditioning coach there for a lot of the time. And probably even more so, my I guess my favourite memory or story I have out of Hawthorn is I was predominantly the rehab coordinator for 4 years anyway at Hawthorn, and I was able to walk into the doctor's office and spend time with the doctor, and who was Michael McDeasy, and a couple of others, and Andrew Lambert, who was the head physio, and they would walk me through scans, they would walk me through decisions they'd made, they'd walk me through rehab / reconditioning protocols, all sorts of stuff, and that set me up to move into the role that I'm in now, because I had such a great understanding of their role and what they do, and a great respect for their role and what they do. And that's sort of what I mean about the collaborative nature of the footy club and the department that we were in. We're all in it to help each other.
And so often you hear about siloed departments in footy clubs, not just AFL, but high performance units. It's not very high performing, if I can use that terrible pun. So I am interested though in maybe the lessons that you've learned. So it does take a culture to someone or a member of people to drive that collaborative effort amongst people and that freedom of communication. And it is probably something that was deliberately done by someone somewhere. I'm interested, like I said, you had some great mentors during your time, Andrew being one, and the others that you mentioned. You also had some time with Darren Burgess as well, and plenty of the other mentors that you mentioned throughout our conversation so far. You also touched on how at one point you got a feedback from a high performance manager role that you applied for, that your management skills weren't where they needed to be. I want you to maybe speak to people that have had some experience in the industry, exercise science, physio, strength and conditioning, but they're looking to take that next step. They're looking to be the head of strength and conditioning, or they're looking to transition into a head of high performance role. Anything that you had to learn, whether it be through academia and courses, or whether it had to be from experience and somebody telling you, that you'd be able to share for the audience?
Yeah, well, I guess when you're trying to move into the more senior management roles, the bit that gets missed, I believe, in the high performance manager title is the third word, manager, strength and conditioning manager, rehab manager. I guess the big thing that absolutely everybody that is within a footy club or an elite sporting environment, everyone has the theoretical knowledge. There's different types of theoretical knowledge, and people spin things different ways, but generally everyone is singing from the same hymn book in that regard. It's the ability to manage people and the athletes that you got to get around. And again, that speaks to time in the system, I think, dealing with lots of different people. But also, I guess one thing I did was go out and do a few courses in leadership and management through Hawthorn. I did a course. I was able to, through Selwyn Griffith up at Brisbane, he set up a course to do through leading teams. So that's the area that I needed the most work in to move into a more senior role in management or leadership. And it is difficult to, I guess, get the experience on the job if you're not in those positions. But trying to, I guess, manually apply those skills somewhere else would be the advice that I'd give. And whoever your senior person within the football or elite club it is, trying to pry some of their demands off them to get that experience, whether it be presenting in front of the players, presenting in front of the coaches is another way to gain that type of leadership experience.
When you said that just made me think about confidence, confidence within the system, contextual understanding, which all comes back to time in the system. Do you think that confidence and context go a long way in developing those manager traits, or is there other things? You mentioned that the courses that you did. Was there any skills that you really valued out of those tertiary courses, or would you more lean to? I guess what I'm trying to get at is it more of an experience thing in your opinion, or from your experience, or is it more of a case of actually these tertiary studies really helped? What would you sort of lean towards?
Good question. Look, I think for the majority, I think experience is really important. I majored in sports coaching with my undergrad, so I had exposure to some of the people watching would know David Parkin, who's a legend of the AFL, coached Carlton, played at Hawthorn. He was at Deakin University lecturing in sports coaching. so where he helped me was breaking down my coaching skills. I was videoing myself coaching in hockey. So I think theoretically that was a big plus for me. Again, I didn't know it at the time. It was uncomfortable seeing myself coach, but that certainly set me up to be able to get in front of people and do what I had to do as far as communicate messages across, whether it be in hockey or footy. But in saying all that, I'm an introvert, so it doesn't come naturally to me to get up in front of. I don't want to do it, but it's something that I had to work on throughout my career. So it's probably a bit of both, but certainly if you haven't done a coaching or a leadership course, it's experience. It's getting in front of people.
And that recording, now more accessible and somewhat more accepted than ever. And I think if people did want to go out and start recording themselves, maybe in environments where they don't feel comfortable, I don't think anyone's going to knock you. If you're a junior and you say, I'm just recording myself, not to be flash or brash or look at me, I'm not going to use it for any other my own development. I don't think there'd be anyone with a right mind that would turn around and go, oh, don't film that. I think that's a really good tip for young coaches and something that sort of I implement from the sport world in my own role, sort of in a commercial sales job and recording and looking through things and I like. So I think that's fantastic. One thing I'm really interested in is we talked a little bit about emerging managers so far, sort of been a bit of a theme of our conversation, but I'm curious to hear your advice for younger students starting out. So one of the questions we'd like to end with here is if you were starting out in this day and age, what would be your advice for people coming into the industry, trying to make something of themselves in our industry and ultimately be able to pay the bills working in the industry that we all love, which is sport?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we both spoke about it is patience, and it's getting harder and harder to, especially after this year, to land roles within elite, I guess, well-paid roles within elite sporting organisations. So patience is a big thing. But whilst being patient, you've got to work on your craft. And again, once the gold standard has been reached, whether it be masters, honours, some people go down the PhD path. It's a people-dominated industry. It's relationships-based. So we all come out of university with our masters or whatever it might be, but in the end, what gets you through is your ability to create relationships, and it doesn't matter. So my number one goal when I walked into this footy club, before I walked in the door, I said to myself, I am going to spend the first month building relationships. I don't care what is on my to-do list and what the footy manager wants from me. I'll try and get that done. But first and foremost is building relationships with players and staff, because that's ultimately what we're dealing with here. Yes, we want wins and losses, but you get more out of people with good relationships, and that doesn't change whether you're a work experience student, whether you're an intern, whether you're a part-time employee. It's the same formula from where I'm coming from, because again, we all know a similar amount and you can learn on the job all the stuff that you need to learn, but unless you've got those skills, those soft skills of building relationships, I can safely say that you probably won't go too far. And I guess the magic question is, when am I ready to put myself forward into an elite sporting environment? And I don't necessarily have the answer to that question, but if you've got mentors around you and you've got people around you who can help you with your communication and relationship building skills, then they'll probably be able to let you know. But if I'm honest with you, I very rarely see a 22-year-old student fresh out of university come into a footy club and be able to build really strong relationships with Jared Ruffhead. It's just really difficult. So that speaks to the patient's side of things.
And you know, the way you speak about relationships, I think it's very. I just want to highlight the names that you've mentioned. If you weren't actually that close with those people, you wouldn't get on a video call, no matter how many people say this and say those names. You know, you wouldn't, if they didn't know you or you didn't actually have a proper relationship with them, you wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And I think it's something to just know somebody, but it's another thing to go, you know, if someone came to them, those people, so the Andrew Russells and Darren Burgess of the world, and then they asked those people about Phil, are you, being Phil, going to be comfortable with what those people are going to say about you? And I think that is a really good measuring stick of how developed a relationship is and how comfortable you are with that relationship. And that's something that I picked up from our time together, albeit quite short. Another thing that you mentioned is that you are an introvert, and I'm interested in, when you say, you know, my first month I'm dedicated to building relationships, that's obviously a hard task for you. Obviously you have the skills and now you're feeling a bit more comfortable in that space, but naturally that's a hard task. I might start with, you know, for people that are younger and feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know how to build relationships. I would just say, and I'd love for you to jump in and take this question into a far better direction than I would be able to take it, Phil. But I would just say, you know, asking why, or you know, if something's been done in a particular way at a club, not why as in, oh, why is that? I think there's something that can be better. But why do you actually do that? Tell me a little bit more about that, or why do you as an individual prefer to do it that way? Let me know a little bit more about you. And then just that why question in different ways, not just asking why on repeat like you're a tape recorder, but why contextually lends you understand the environment a little bit more and allows people to open themselves up and let them know, you know, you'll get to better understand the way they work. You know, are they an introvert just because of questions you ask them, or are they someone who's a bit more gun-ho and just gets into it and worries about cleaning up the mess later? That would be my advice to people, you know, if they don't know how to start building relationships. That's where I would start. Phil, how would you start if you were someone young? And if you don't mind, how are you starting now as someone who's coming in as a HPM?
Yep. I'm a bit different. So I don't go for the why, I go for the who. Who are they? So most people who have been in a job interview with me will attest to this, but I ask who they are and where they've come from really early. So who they are could be, what's your family situation? It might start with, where are you from? Okay, cool. Who'd you grow up with? Brothers and sisters? Oh yeah. And then that might fire up a little connection where you know someone from that area. You and I had that discussion earlier around where you're from. And that immediately allows a connection piece between whoever it is you're talking to and what they want out of, you know, rather than going straight to the why, you're coming from them from a position of potentially care, as to you're getting to understand the person first, and then you broaden out to the skill set. Why you're lifting that way, you know, why do you kick the footy that way, whatever it might be from a technical standpoint. So again, that folds back to that relationship that you form with that person. As an introvert, I get energy out of having those conversations one-on-one, where I feel uncomfortable is probably a bit more getting it in front of the group and performing in a way that the group needs at the time. But the one-on-one stuff is my wheelhouse. That's the stuff I love.
Tremendous. Like I said, you're going to take it in a far better direction than I, and that's why we've got you on, mate. So look, I think that's a better time than any to wrap up, and I really appreciate the time. 2 weeks into a new role, a very important role in your career, and you did mention to me that you know, anything to keep busy would be good, but I still do really appreciate your time, Phil. Anything that you wanted to finish off with? Anything you wanted to get off your chest?
No. I guess for me, if there's anyone over this side of the country, now that this is my home, that would like to, sit down for a coffee, or I'm always happy to find time. Especially people within the hockey industry as well. I like to look after those people, but it's as we said, it's pretty isolated over this side of the country. And if there's any professional development that could be given or around, I'm all ears. So the only other thing I'd say is go Freo.
He knows I'm an Eagles fan, so a little jab there. All right, Phil, thank you very much for coming on. For those that are watching, we're filming this pre-Christmas, hence the sort of, I'm already on holiday mode, hence sort of the white linen shirt. That's all I had from the wash. So Merry Christmas, take care, have a happy New Year. Thanks for tuning in, and Phil, thanks again for coming on. See you later, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.